Strange and Scary Vanishings, the Real Rant Reviewer. Strange and Scary Vanishing number 1. Allie Gilmore. At 30 years old, Tallahassee resident Allie Gilmore was finally able to check off her goals she worked so hard for. She landed a good job at the Florida Department of Health as an analyst, was pregnant with her first child, and had purchased her first home in a good community. All that was taken away from her when she seemed to vanish in thin air. It was only a little over a decade ago that billboards and yard signs were plastered over Tallahassee screaming for help to find Gilmore, who had mysteriously disappeared. A $30,000 reward was offered for information on Gilmore's whereabouts in the days after she was reported missing on February 3rd, 2006. Police went door to door looking to see if anyone knew where she was. Search teams from all over the country spent endless hours in the woods hoping to find Gilmore. This all became so much bigger than anyone thought it would be, said one of Gilmore's friends, Liz Denson. People really did care. They didn't have to know her. Gilmore disappeared just as her dreams were all aligning, Denson said. Her disappearance was puzzling for those who knew her well. She was known for never missing a day at work, unless she told her boss she wasn't coming in. But on that morning, she didn't show up to work and never called. Gilmore was 4 months pregnant. Denson said that this was out of character for Gilmore, not a call or warning that she wasn't coming in that day. The last reported sighting of Gilmore was when she left her part-time job at Publix on Thursday night. Her boss and a co-worker went over to her house when Gilmore didn't show up to work and found that she wasn't there. They talked to neighbors hoping that they saw her go somewhere. When no one had answers, they knew it was time to call the police. According to News 1, when the police arrived, they found nothing suspicious inside the house. The mystery continues to this day. The story came as a shock to many who lived near her on Lorraine Court. She had everything going for her. Seems like that was taken from her, said Jeremy Mutz, a former Tallahassee prosecutor. To Gilmore's friends and family, she always seemed happy. She possessed a positivity that other people always noticed. She had an infectious smile, Denson said. She would always have a smile on her face. It was contagious. If you were sick or down, she would try to make you smile. She and Gilmore quickly became friends when they were co-workers at the Department of Health. Their bond grew when Gilmore invited Denson to her family's Thanksgiving dinner in South Florida. I never really liked going home for Thanksgiving because both my parents were deceased and would bring back bad memories, Denson said. Allie told me to come home with her. We had a road trip and it was fun. Her family was inviting. I was thankful I met them. Gilmore would always make people feel included to reach out and help others. I give her a lot of credit for my college degree, which has definitely made my life better, said James Gilmore, her husband at the time of her disappearance. Not for her encouragement and support, I don't know that I ever would have went back to school to get it. Her husband wasn't the only person that Gilmore encouraged. She convinced Denson to start attending church and buy a house. Gilmore's support of others was evidenced following her disappearance when her friends came together to print out "Where is Allie Gilmore" flyers. Her friends felt that there was a lack of coverage for African American missing women, so they were determined to get Gilmore as much press as possible. They pushed and pushed the flyers of Gilmore that people started to pay attention to the vanishing. The story became so much bigger. Billboards started being put up and the story even got national coverage. To this day, the story remains a mystery. 12 years have gone by, yet there isn't a day where Allie doesn't cross the mind of friends and loved ones. The first several years without Allie were horrible for me, Gilmore's husband remembered. From the despair of wondering what happened to her and why, to the loneliness of not seeing her and hearing her voice while living in a house with all her things. There are many questions surrounding the vanishing, but her family and friends try to stay optimistic that she might still be out there. My family always asks me about her, Denson said. I like to make a light of the situation and think that maybe she's out in Bermuda, living her life and happy. I have to make light of it because I don't want to think about something horrible happening to her. Strange and Scary Vanishing number 2. Dennis Lee Anderson. Denny Anderson was a 36-year-old Caucasian male who was last known to be in Murray, Utah on September 15th, 2000. He was last seen wearing a tattered flannel shirt, blue jeans, and had a thin beard. He has health conditions and may need immediate medical attention. Dennis is 5'9" and weighs approximately 160 pounds, with brown hair and blue eyes. In September of 2000, Murray City resident Dennis Lee Anderson went missing, and contact with his family ceased. Anderson lived off and on as a transit or at home with his parents in Murray, Utah. Dennis suffers from a mental condition. There has been no leads or information regarding Anderson's whereabouts since the report was made. Marky Davis said she hasn't given up hope on finding another Utahnian, Dennis Anderson. She said he was likely homeless when he went missing in 2001. Possibly moved out of the state when they moved the homeless out for the Olympics, she said. Strange and scary vanishing number 3, Darlene Ellen Conklin. Darlene Ellen Conklin was last seen on April 19, 1981, leaving the home that she shared with her boyfriend in Muncie, New York. According to her boyfriend, Darlene would occasionally take off and spend some time alone. However, in April of 1981, she never came home. Darlene's mother, however, was worried when she couldn't get in contact with her daughter and later told police that Darlene always kept in contact with her family. Sometime after Darlene's disappearance, officers from an unknown police agency visited a moving and storage company in Mount Kisco, New York, named Wayland's Moving and Storage, where Darlene's boyfriend had worked at the time of her vanishing, looking for information about the remains they had found. These officers brought a Polaroid picture of an unidentified woman who had been recently killed and was found wrapped in a Wayland's Moving and Storage blanket. This visit was not learned about by local police investigating Darlene's disappearance until nearly 30 years later. Darlene's case was officially reopened and relabeled as an unknown death investigation in 2010, after police received a credible tip. This tip included information from an unnamed individual explaining that an acquaintance of the tipster described killing a woman in Muncie, New York in 1981 and disposing of her body. Unfortunately, this tipster did not have any information about the name of this woman or the location where her body was disposed of. Around this time is when local investigators learned about the unidentified police department's trip to Wayland's Moving and Storage nearly 30 years earlier. Through the questioning of employees of the company, investigators learned about the photograph, which according to statements by employees seemed to match Darlene's description, with light brown hair, although every employee gave different descriptions of the young woman from the picture. Unfortunately, there isn't much information available about who Darlene was as a person. Darlene grew up in Franklin, New Jersey, approximately an hour's drive from where she was living at the time of her vanishing. Darlene had 7 siblings, and her brother would later explain in interviews that it was very odd for Darlene not to be in contact with family, especially their mother. He stated, "She always called our mom, no matter what. They were very close." Darlene is further described as someone who really enjoyed life, a fun girl and not someone who would hide, especially not from her family. Darlene enjoyed spending time at a nearby waterfront with friends. Darlene remains a constant thought in her growing family's minds, with memories of her always finding their way into a conversation. Today, nearly 41 years after Darlene was last seen, her investigation remains open, and detectives continue looking for the police agency with information about the young woman in the photograph. Investigators believe that Darlene was killed, and that the woman in the photo is Darlene. However, they have been unsuccessful in their attempts to identify the agency. Darlene Ellen Conklin is described as a Caucasian woman with brown hair and green eyes. Darlene was 21 years old at the time of her vanishing in 1981, weighed 110 to 130 pounds, and was 5'8" tall. Darlene has the following tattoos on her hands: Love on one hand and Terry on the other. The Terry tattoo may have been changed to hate, or may appear to be Jerry. Today, Darlene would be 61 years old. There is currently a $2,500 reward for information that leads to the arrest and convictions of the persons responsible for Darlene's vanishing or death. Darlene Conklin's death is one of the more than a dozen unsolved homicides in Rockland during the past 40 years. In many cases, police have said they had a strong idea who committed the killings but couldn't prove it. Darlene Conklin had been seen as rebellious, but when she disappeared at 21 without a trace in April of 1981, friends and family and the Rant police suspected the worst. She is presumed to have been a victim of violence since last being seen in Muncie, where she lived with a boyfriend. Conklin's mother, Dolores, filed a missing persons report in 1981 and checked with the police over the years. Dolores Conklin died in 2006. Rant Police Sergeant Thomas Dalen said detectives, including himself, reopened the case in September 2010 after a phone tip offered new information. The tipster told Dolan about hearing people talk about a woman being killed in 1981 in Muncie, where Conklin had been living in a house off routes 59 and 306. The information fit with the missing persons report. Although the investigation hit a wall, Dolan said he's still treating the case as a homicide, and he believes there are witnesses with information who can shed light on the case. A key to the investigation has been learning whether another police agency found Conklin's body, Dolan said. She had distinct physical marks, tattoos on her hands, which police said were not that common in 1981. The tattoo on one hand read love, and either Jerry, Terry, or hate on the other hand. Her brother Thomas Conklin of New Jersey has said Terry was for a former boyfriend. He said his sister also copied a tattoo that was on their father's hands. Investigators also have been trying to find police reports concerning a body found elsewhere in the nation that was wrapped in a blanket bearing the name of Whalen Moving and Storage in Mount Kisco. Detectives from an unknown police agency reportedly found a Polaroid photograph of a woman, possibly Conklin, wrapped in a moving company blanket. Her then boyfriend, Stephen Zaney, worked for Whalen, police said. Darlene was last seen April 19, 1981 in the area of Muncie, New York. She may have been beaten to death and her body disposed of. This is thought to have occurred in her home in Muncie, New York. She was last seen in Muncie, New York sometime in April of 1981. She lived with her boyfriend, Stephen Zaney, in a house off routes 59 and 306, and she frequented the waterfront beach area of Harvester Straw, New York, near the U.S. gypsum plant. She has not been heard from since. Her mom reported her missing later that year after the family suddenly stopped hearing from her by phone, which was unusual. Her boyfriend at the time stated that Darlene would drop out of sight from time to time, and one day she simply left and never came back. In April of 2011, there was an anonymous tip given to the Rant, New York police that led to the reopening of Darlene's case. She may have been the victim of a homicide. The tip stated that an acquaintance described killing a woman and disposing of her body in 1981. Rant police have been investigating another report that a woman's body was found wrapped in a blanket with the name Westchester County Moving Company on it, shortly after Darlene vanished. Please, do not just vanish. Thank you for listening and watching.